Dr. Emily Koochel serves as the Manager of Financial Wellness at eMoney Advisor, where she leads innovative research and educational initiatives. With a PhD in applied family science and a master's in financial planning, she employs a multidisciplinary approach to explore the intersection of financial technology and financial psychology, aiming to embrace the planning experience for both advisors and for clients. In this session, Emily does a deep dive into some of her recent research on the positive impact that financial psychology principles can have on a client-advisor relationship. It's groundbreaking stuff and is soon going to be considered the industry standard, so pay attention because this session is going to help you get ahead of the curve and level up your practice. Well, Emily, welcome to the Client Connection Summit. Thank you for being willing to come and spend some time with us and share some of the cool research you've been up to recently.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
So my first learning of who you are and what you're up to was this recent study that you guys did over at eMoney that demonstrated, it kind of showed off the impact that that financial psychology and a combination of financial psychology and like specific software tools can have on financial advisors with their clients. Can you give me a little overview of that study? And what I'd love to do in this conversation is dig a little deeper and help kind of break down some of the insights that you gleaned from that research.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually going to I'm going to step us back just a little bit of how we got to the research that we did for this year. So
Love it.
at really the top of eMoney's list, at the top of a lot of advisors' list and others, we continue to see this word personalization. And we continue to want to know what does personalization mean, both to the advisor and of course to the consumers and the clients that they're actually serving. And interestingly enough, we find that there is a bit of a discrepancy here when we look at personalization from the advisor perspective and then from the client perspective. What's great though is while there are discrepancies, advisors genuinely continue to tell us that they do not take a cookie cutter approach. We actually see this increase if you're a CFP more specifically, that they really value and understand um, the outcomes of having a tailored approach with their clients. But it's the type of personalization that actually switches up a little bit here. So we find that about 6 in 10 consumers report that personalization is actually lacking in their financial advice. And what they mean by that is the type of personalization that's important to them. So advisors tend to look at more monetary goals and outcomes as they're trained to do. So no surprise there. While consumers and clients are actually looking for things that we would stress are beyond the numbers or beyond the plan. So implications for reducing my feelings of financial stress or financial anxiety. I just want to feel better and I want to know that I'm okay. And sometimes, while the intention of the advisor is, of course, to get there with showing them, hey, the financial plan allows us, certain successes or progress, it's in the communication that we're also giving to them. So, another key element of this personalization is we find that consumers and clients want advisors to communicate in ways that they understand, which means let me know that I'm going to be okay, right? Like, as we're doing this plan, this is all really great information, but also let me know that we're going to be okay. So we take the results of this study and then we lead it into, okay, so we know this is important to them. We have a great technology with eMoney. How can we actually bring this to life and start to scale this? So the research that we more recently did was looking at elements of financial psychology. We call them FinPsych actions in this study. And then we also look at technology that we offer and others offer, which is a client portal or a client website. So this is the side of the software that the client can engage in and log into. Essentially, what we see is those advisors that are encouraging their clients to use the client portal and the clients are using it, and they're implementing these FinPsych actions that we bring up. We see the greatest impact for financial satisfaction, and we see referrals and loyalty and trust and reduction of anxiety and all of these really great outcomes that we would hope to see inside of the financial planning engagement. But we find it to be really powerful when we bring these two together. So that's
Mm,
kind of the how we got there and a little bit of the high level results of what we saw this most recent year.
thank you. That gave a beautiful overview of why the research even took place and some of the amazing findings that you've created. I've spoken to several advisors recently, and this phrase keeps coming up, which is my clients want me to stay in my lane. There's a little bit of a fear of going beyond just providing financial services that they believe they were hired to provide. So can you talk a little bit more about what it would look like? You alluded to it a little bit, but I want you to dive a little bit more deeply into what it would look like for an advisor to go beyond just providing financial services, and maybe what some of those financial psychology principles are that really have an impact on financial satisfaction and overall like satisfaction with working with an advisor.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so when we did this research, we looked at a list or set of 21 FinPsych actions, if you will. And we found out that not all FinPsych actions are created equally. So what we wanted to do is say that's a whole lot of actions to say, hey, go out and start trying these. So let's boil it down to the top five. What are the most impactful or what can give us the highest lift on satisfaction increase and those other outcomes that we talked about? So first and foremost, at the top of the list of these 10 psych actions is helps me identify meaningful personal and financial goals and objectives. So what this tells us is we can attach it, of course, to the monetary goals that we have inside of the financial planning process and the techniques and features that we would expect from that process, but it's making sure that that's actually tagged into a value or concept or an objective that is important to the client. Not making the assumption that it's important to them. It's actually asking them the personal questions of what does this mean to you? So let's take a really common financial planning objective for most people, which is retirement. Retirement in general means, look, we're turning off the income and we're looking at this next chapter of life. But more specifically, retirement looks very different for each family, each circumstance, each couple, each individual. So it's having them gain clarity on what retirement actually means to them, which then helps you understand what retirement means to them. So, for instance, if retirement means that I have grandchildren, it's really important to me that I now have the time to go visit my grandchildren, and that's going to take a certain amount of funding to do so. You understand that that's where the money is going, and travel is important to me. And not only that travel is important to me, but it's important because of this family connection. So I've got to maintain that as a priority for several different reasons. But I'm now informed about what that priority means to you and to me. So that's going to allow me to adjust my conversation with you. And heaven forbid I make the suggestion that we decrease that funding, you're going to be a little upset with me, right? It feels like, oh, you really missed the mark here. So sometimes it's actually just making sure that we make those personal connections throughout. And so within that top five, we also see elements of always considers what I value most in life. In addition to that, we see that within that top five, that making sure that you do some of that discovery process, while I encourage you to do it throughout the whole planning experience with your clients, it's really important to them that you do that before delivering financial advice. And this can be really tough for advisors because we have so much incredible knowledge. You guys were trained, you have exceptional education, of course, but people want to feel like we're talking, we're getting to know each other, we're building trust in a relationship. And rather than seeing that as something that is taking too much time on the front end, I would encourage the reframe that I'm getting really relationship rich information that will continue to inform the financial plan. So those are a few of the top actions, which you may already be doing, but sometimes it's just hearing it and um, reminding yourself that those are really important elements.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is it's so important to understand your clients deeply to do the diagnosis or to do the assessment before you do the diagnosis.
Right.
You need to figure out, what it is that is most important to them before you start giving them advice. It seems it seems kind of obvious, but it sounds like it's also a deviation from maybe historically what the role of a financial advisor has done. So, can you contrast what you just shared with maybe what a financial advisor would do that isn't maybe dipping their toe in the water on the financial psychology side of things?
Yeah, sure. So if we look at just the evolution of financial planning or financial services in general, we can see this as it traditionally has been pretty transactional. It's been product based at times. And so that really eliminated really the need, for all intents and purposes, to have to do some of that deep dive there. In addition to that, working at a technology company, if we look at the parallel of technology and the evolution and development there, if we go back not that long ago, we didn't have all the access to the information that we have today. What that allowed the advisor to do is be the primary agent of that information. So I'm going to you, and for me to be able to fact check that was it took longer to do. Not to say that you couldn't, but it took longer than it does today. And so what that means is inside of this relationship, we no longer are just the one and kind of primary source here. You're competing with what others believe they could already know by themselves, what could already be available. And so extending your value beyond what I could find on my own is going to be incredibly important. And it parallels this evolution of financial services. The expectations of the client have also changed. We no longer believe that that's all I should get from my financial advisor. The concept of comprehensive and holistic financial planning has been quite socialized over the last few years, several years. And so I now expect that of my advisor. In addition to that, if we continue the parallel to technology, everything in my life has become more personalized to me, right? My Netflix account gets smarter every single time. Amazon is one click and it knows exactly what I'm thinking. It's not that far of a stretch to believe that I would expect something very similar of a financial planner who I'm giving all of this information to. So really this is just the evolution of where we are today, and we continue to see that evolve. And in addition to that, like I said, I just encourage the concept of my value now goes beyond some of which may not have been so easily accessible not that long ago.
Mm. What I'm hearing you say is there's maybe a little bit of a difference between the idea of personalization and customization. And I think it can be a little overwhelming as an advisor to think you need to customize every single person's plan down to the little detail. And what I'm hearing you say a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong in this assumption, is that if you can learn enough about them and really learn about their goals, their objectives, their values, their beliefs, the things that are most important to them, and you can connect those things in a clear way to the plan that you've developed, that gives them a lot of peace of mind and reassurance and makes them feel like you're personalizing their plan, even though it may not be, you may not be doing a bespoke plan for every single individual from the ground up.
Right. Absolutely. And what this can tie to, if you're like, okay, this feels like so much what I mean, it's an honest question. What am I as an advisor getting out of this? I, of course, want my clients to feel good. I'm all for it, but I'm also doing this for some other reasons. And that's fair. That is absolutely fair. So let's talk about that. If we're spending a little bit more time on the front end, right? And again, this can feel like, gosh, I've got a lot of other things to do. First and foremost, lean into whatever technology it is that you're using to build more efficient workflows to help with uploading documents and data sourcing and those elements there. But then, as we also move along in the financial planning process, when it comes to client action and implementation, this is where that deep dive that you did early on really matters. This is where we can see that client action actually start to accelerate because we're not getting to that point without knowing enough about them. So, for instance, if I'm telling them to take certain actions and they are resistant to that for one reason or another, I may or may not know why that is. Hopefully, I've done some of that self discovery to eliminate or diminish whatever that challenge may be, but I've got some insight into it. Otherwise, we can get to that point where we're asking somebody to make a behavior change or an implementation in their financial plan. And it seems as though I am being met with a non-compliant client, right? Like they just don't want to. They don't want to, they don't feel motivated to. And sometimes that's true. And that's an opportunity to decide whether or not this is a good fit and we continue to work together. But other times, this can simply be that, oh, I need to just reframe or recommunicate why this is important to them. So I need to connect it back. So if we maintain um, the example of retirement. Okay, so remember retirement is I want to go see my grandchildren and I want to be able to travel. Okay, so my response to you as the financial advisor is, hey, it looks like we're going to need to decrease monthly spending. All right. That feels like a limitation. I don't really want to adjust my lifestyle. I don't really want to adjust my behaviors. I'm comfortable with the way that I'm doing things today. The reframe here is I'm going to make a connection to that future goal that I know is of a value and important to you. So rather than seeing this as a limitation to today, I'm going to say if we make this reduction, if we make this change, this is actually going to allow us to make greater progress towards the goal of being able to travel to see your grandchildren, and we're going to do it on time. Oh, well, in that case, I can save X amount of dollars less. No problem. That's important to me. Grandchildren, that's where that change links to something that's important to me. So it's hard to see that future element, but so much of what we do in financial planning is actually preparing for the future. Now, what I've done is I've connected to an intrinsic motivation, meaning a personal motivation to them, and they are more likely to stick with it, continue to want to do it, and feel ownership of it. I feel ownership of I'm making progress towards my future and towards a future that's important.
This reminds me so much of the work of James Clear. He wrote the book Atomic Habits, and he talks about the difference between an outcome-based goal and an identity-based goal, and how people are far more likely to follow through on their commitments and keep up a habit if it's an identity-based habit as opposed to an outcome-based habit. And it sounds like this principle that you're talking about is instead of talking to your clients about, hey, we have this benchmark to hit, or we have this outcome to achieve. We want to pay off the debt, or we want to save up for retirement, or we want to put aside such and such amount of money for a down payment on a house for the new house or next generation or whatever. There's all these different financial goals that have specific, really clear benchmarks. Instead, if you can attach it to the value of who they are, if you can attach it to the thing that's really important to them, you're a grandparent, you really care about your relationship with your grandkids, and I want you to be able to nurture those relationships in your retirement. That's a way more motivating goal than, hey, we need to fill up the bank account to this certain benchmark to achieve our goal. Um,
Yeah. It just offers clarity and transparency of why we're doing what
yeah.
we're doing. It can be really clear to us as financial professionals of why this makes sense. It's about translating it into somebody else's life and circumstances. And again, getting back to we've seen that the last 2 or 3 years in our e-money research, communicating in terms that I understand. It's making that connection. They also talk about it being one of the highest orders of learning and understanding your craft is to be able to, communicate it in different ways and in different situations, and so it's also, again, it's showing your value and that what you have to offer, the fact that you can find different ways to translate something that's so complex to your clients to help them ultimately.
Yeah, and I love that this helps to overcome one of the most common trials or frustrations that financial advisors run into, which is having a client not follow through on their commitments, on their side of things. I'm assuming that these principles can also, there's another problem that I'd love to kind of discuss and maybe you have some insights into. I know it's very common for a financial advisor to engage in business with a family, with a couple, and one person becomes the dominant point of contact, and the other person kind of tends to disengage and fade off into the distance, or off into the background. Can you talk a little bit about how these principles might be used to re-engage that more passive partner?
Yeah, of course. So this is actually very timely. If you have been following some of the research around the great wealth transfer, and of course, with boomers and the relationships and what that's going to look like, there's an anticipation of a great wealth transfer happening for a lot of boomer women. And that's based off of expectancy of males and females. And so what we're seeing is there's actually a really staggering statistic that's been out there. that has been quoted, and it's around 70% of those partners, wives specifically, are leaving those financial advisors after the passing of their significant other, of their husband. That's incredible. And it's an opportunity and a responsibility for the financial industry to be involved and to take action. When we look into that, what's often happening, to your point, is we have somebody, and traditionally speaking here, it's not always absolutely so, but traditionally speaking here, in those conversations, we've seen men being leaned into for historical reasons and traditional reasons, and a whole host of those. The important point here is that the person who has not been the primary client in that relationship often feels like, wait a second, you want to talk to me now? I've been here for years and you haven't had a whole lot of interest in speaking to me. Whether that's because I have said, hey, I don't care, they can take care of it, or because of efforts on both sides, whatever that looks like. But it is in your best interest to make sure that you use some of these elements or these actions to help call them in. Sometimes it can feel as though I don't have anything to offer, or somebody else is really going to be the primary decision maker, and so I'm just here. Use some of these same techniques to find out what is meaningful to them as an individual inside of that relationship, but also using it as an opportunity to find goals together. So this is also just beneficial to the couple satisfaction in general. So we see that when couples have joint goals, they're more satisfied. They tend to be happier and have longer lasting relationships. It's because we're both in line with the same objective. So again, if we're having to make any adjustments to one or another's behavior, I don't see it as, again, this limitation, kind of using the same example, like I'm being restricted because I have to help do something for my husband or wife or family or kids. I see it as we both know where we're going in this financial plan. We're both making that adjustment together and it's contributing to where we ultimately want to go. So I would encourage using the opportunity to learn about that person who may be a little bit more quiet and invite them in and let them know that their voice is valuable. Because sometimes it feels like that it doesn't really matter what I have to say here. And it does. It absolutely does. And for you to have a more successful financial plan because we're accounting for both people equally.
What advice do you have for an advisor who hears this invitation to re-engage a more passive partner and feels a little overwhelmed, maybe worried that they might open up Pandora's box, that they might stumble across like some deep-seated conflict within the couple, or just they might have to deal with real reluctance from the more passive partner or the more active partner who doesn't want their spouse really involved in the conversation, which can also happen.
I would lean into what values and benefits there are to the financial planning process that I hear from both partners. So, let's say that, look, I'm just now going to start to maybe take action to re engage with a partner who's been a little bit more reluctant. Don't expect maybe this immediate overwhelming information. Some may, right? You're like, oh gosh, I've been waiting to say something, and others may still feel like, not today. That's okay, right? Give a little bit of time and kind of figure out what that new relationship and dynamic looks like for you and for them. What are the levels of comfort there? Um, but if it feels a little bit more comfortable, I would frame it in, look, this is going to be really beneficial to the financial plan. I need to make sure that in order for us to hit these goals, these objectives, the things that are important to you, I need to make sure that I hear from both of you. Even if that's just acknowledging that you both are accepting or in alignment of this financial goal, right? Like we can start with just one thing. We both agree on this. We both feel good about this. Yes, no. And if there happens to be any discrepancy there, then say, could you tell me why, right? Maybe why you're not feeling on board with this and what we could do and chat about. It's a very normal and natural feeling for us to um, want to avoid things that we don't know or things that we could not know. So it's very natural to be like, I would rather not because I don't know what's going to be there. We could have we could have conflict. We could have people becoming in disagreement right there, or perhaps we set up a conversation later. But again, I would stress that it's probably important to the financial planning process and important to you to know that information. Also, remember that you may not be the best financial fit. If there is a lot of contention there and resistance from one person or the other, we're probably looking at a potential referral to a financial therapist who would be better equipped to help with that um, relationship and anything that's happening with money in the relationship itself. That's probably a better fit. And what a cool opportunity for you to help potentially get them to that better fit for this time and then maybe work together later after some of that has been managed properly.
What a great answer. Um, I'm thinking now about this baby boomer generation that controls the majority of the wealth right now, and it seems like they're in a situation where their goals are changing a little bit. They've been saving, 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 and now the concern is starting to shift towards uh, passing on their inheritance to the next generation. And there's a lot of worries and concerns that come up that are very different than the worries and concerns that they had when they were trying to build up their investment portfolio. Do you have any perspective or insight into what those concerns might look like and how to navigate those a little bit?
So I feel like each generation kind of has their own relationship to money, to the experience that they had with that money. So thinking about what was happening when you were a child, not only just in your family circumstance, but in your nation and your economy and each one of those, all of that information was actually feeding into your relationship with money. So there's almost virtually no way that a previous generation and a generation today are going to have the exact same experience, right? Because the world has continued to evolve. But it does feel as though, gosh, I have these really strong values that were informed by a whole lot of really important events in my life. And the next generation, it feels like they have no idea, right? They can't relate. And I am so afraid of what that looks like, especially because this is my hard earned money, right? I've put in years for this. I want to make sure that they have the gratitude for it and the respect for it and that they're getting similar values. So, what I would encourage here is also communication about those values. What did you learn that was so important to you that you would like them to know? The way that we learn about money happens really, really early on. Actually, it happens earlier than we think. Uh, happens hearing conversations, that happens watching transactions at the grocery store, all different elements of what we call informal learning. What tends to be really critical in helping to encourage or act as an agent of change for financial behaviors and financial management are the formal and explicit conversations that we have. For example, if a child gets an allowance, we can assume that, oh, they probably had better money management skills than a child who didn't have an allowance, right? They had money in their hands and they had to um, navigate that. It's actually those that were given an allowance that had a formal or explicit conversation around that money, whether it was saving money is important, we're opening a checking account, etc. That's really where we saw it start to inform these elements of financial management.
Mm.
So I encourage the same, not that, we're looking at allowances here necessarily. We may be talking about older adults and the inheritances. Inform them why it's important to you. Also, make it explicit if you want something done with that money that they know about it. The assumption of, oh, I hope they do the right thing isn't going to be satisfying if they make the wrong decision there. So start that communication and socialization and openness of money conversation, which is so scary because there's so many people that have been raised in privacy of money, But the only way to start to change that culture is to talk about it and communicate about it.
This seems like another one of those things that an advisor could offer their clients that may not have been what they expected to offer initially when they engaged in business together. Like, I'm just here to
Right.
manage your finances or to manage your portfolio and your investments. But in this situation, it's like there's probably a lot of people who don't know how to have these conversations or never have had them and could use the help of a professional to facilitate these intergenerational conversations about values and expectations and about inheritance. Um, that's a
Yeah. I mean, and again, if we're looking at this from a different lens,
mhm.
there is that play of, look, this is another client that I can retain. So similar to what we saw with spouses that were not being called into those conversations, you can assume a similar experience for a child who may or may not have been involved in a conversation or two, and they were being called up from the kids' table now of like, oh, this financial advisor is so interested in me all of the sudden after all of these years.
I feel
Start to
so icky.
cultivate, yeah, start to cultivate that relationship there and early on and with genuine interest. Now we've got loyalty and retention and a true relationship that's been built over years, which is, of course, good for you and for them.
Awesome. Well, this is a perfect hint at what I wanted to kind of wrap up our conversation around is we've talked a lot about things that financial advisors can do to give their clients a better experience and these financial psychology principles that can really impact their satisfaction and help them accomplish their goals and overcome some of these obstacles, uh, the relational or psychological obstacles that might be coming up and preventing them from achieving their goals or having the peace of mind that they're seeking. But a lot of the conversation has leaned towards how does this benefit the clients. In what ways does doing this benefit the advisor's business? We started hinting at that, but I want you to give a little dive a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah, of course. So if we look at it from the advisor side, again, with this, sometimes it feels like we're taking a little too much time to get to know people and understand some of this feel good stuff. And that's not really what I'm here to do. We also have research that suggests that as you take your time and you continue to do that, not only in the discovery or onboarding phase, but you continue to facilitate that type of relationship throughout the planning experience, that clients are showing or revealing rather more assets held away. So this is probably one of the biggest blind spots for advisors is the assets that they don't manage. So with that continued conversation, the building of trust, the engagement, you're actually edging out whoever may be managing the other assets or assets that they had forgot about because you asked them about a previous work and they're like, oh gosh, I worked for them for a little. Oh, did you ever have a retirement plan? I think I did. It's those moments that can start to reveal it intentionally or unintentionally. So assets being held away are often more likely to be revealed with these deeper engagements. In addition to that, loyalty and retention, but also referrals. So when we look at why people decide to engage with a financial planner, word of mouth and more specifically the word of family and friends is one of the greatest agents of why somebody chooses to work with the financial planner that they do, alongside of course, that they value it and they trust it and other elements. But how they initially engage is often from others around them. So, if we think about how important that relationship is, I'm more likely to be somebody who's going to refer or bring up the fact that I had a really great conversation with my financial planner the other day. It's so strange. They asked me these questions about um, my experience with money as a kid or, something that we were chatting about. And it just brought up the funniest story. I haven't talked about that. Your financial advisor asked you that? That's so strange. Mine would never. They're just very to the point. You're like, "Oh my gosh, you should check this person out. They're great. I know exactly where we're headed. I feel good about it, and kind of feel like we're friends. We're in it together. That's a great feeling." So it's moments like that that work in your favor that are happening outside of the planning conversation when you're not even around, but you've invested the time into it.
Mm,
Um, in addition to that, trust. Trust is one of the greater outcomes that we see from all of this, and it maintains itself throughout the research that we've done. Now, the reason trust is important is because during times of volatility, trust is very fragile, and you can't control when that volatility is going to happen. Volatility could be that the market changes, there's a global pandemic, or it could simply be that your neighbor said, my advisor has me investing in X, Y, and Z. Does yours? No, I'm making a ton. Oh my gosh, am I working with the wrong person? That trust is now very fragile. If you've invested into the time and the relationship, when they come to you with these concerns, which are inevitable, and you say it's okay and you can show them why and you can point back to all of those elements of remember this is important and this is what we're planning for. This is just a moment in time and here's right we planned for this. We're all right. They're more likely to stay with you during those moments because of the investment that you put into them. So it pays dividends sometimes outside of the financial statement, but you'll see it in all of these other really great areas.
amazing. Um, what tools or resources would you, I'm assuming, especially if advisors aren't used to doing this, to digging really deep into the relationship side of things, or they really want to, but they feel a little overwhelmed with where do I start? Are there any tools or resources that you would recommend that could be really helpful?
Yeah, sure. So there's of course a lot of self kind of learning that you can do out there. So one of the kind of key pieces of this, if you happen to be a CFP or looking to be a CFP, this is actually now a required principal knowledge topic of the CFP exam. The CFP has actually put out specific books around what's known as the psychology of financial planning. If you're like, "Hey, I don't have the interest in, going the CFP route," no problem. Tons of other really great, books and places to look for it. Dr. Clance and Chafin, they also have a book out there that's The Psychology of Financial Planning. They have 2 books, which is really great, and so the CFP board does as well where they have essentially the knowledge that we're talking about today, but then they both have an associated workbook. The FP board does as well as Dr. Chafin and Quant. So if you're looking for how do I bring this to life? What's a worksheet or what's a way that I could start to standardize or get a little bit more comfortable with this? They have those workbooks out there and available. They also have an online course for advisors as well who are looking to do just some self-paced learning around the psychology of financial planning. The other thing that I would encourage you to do, which there's no purchase necessary for this one, is start to explore your own money history and experience there. And the question that we often prompt for couples, but also individuals, just in exploring your initial relationship with money, is sit down and think about what was your first memory of money? What was your, or if not your first, maybe one of your most impactful memories of money? Think about what you learned from that memory. Do you hold some of those behaviors today? Did you change any of them? Why? Why not? The reason that I say that is because if you look at the research from CFP board and others, when we start to engage in this financial psychology, is you actually influence that relationship too. So your understanding, your experience, your biases, all of these things that you may know that actually comes into play. So understanding what that looks like for you is also going to be really, really important. And that's one that you can start right after this if you really want to. And no cost associated to it, but will absolutely help be a more informed financial advisor.
Right. And how can you and eMoney help out in this whole process?
Yeah. So eMoney is an incredible financial planning technology software. We, of course, offer a really robust financial planning platform. So this is really cool if you're looking to have that financial plan available, get into the depths of it. One of the cool elements outside of the client portal and the website that we talked about is also the opportunity to use technology as a way to visualize the financial plan. It brings it to life. I can see it in action. So when I'm making those suggestions about a behavior change or increasing contributions, which feels like that's taking away from my monthly income, I don't love that. You can actually show them that, right? Like bring it to life, the impact that that has and the progress that they're going to make and the increased progress that this could look like. Or again, in times of volatility, use the technology and the software as a way to help settle some of those concerns. Look, we're braced for impact. We're okay, and here's how I know that. I'm going to show you. Also, encourage them to use the technology themselves. If you have a client portal or a client website available to you, encourage them to use it. So, in those conversations, when they're asking these great questions to you, show them, that's a great question. And here's how I would do that inside of the client portal. I'm just going to pull it up really quickly. So when you have this question, when, we're outside of our meeting today, you know
Mm.
exactly where to go get it. So those concerns that you and I have when we're laying our head down at night, we're like, gosh, I wonder what would happen if I changed up this thing or that thing. Encourage them to feel empowered to go use that technology themselves. And they can learn and they can have these really informed educational conversations with you, but it also helps to build self-efficacy and confidence and all these really great things because I'm involved in that financial plan. So technology is incredibly powerful.
This is like the other half of the research that you were talking about. The one side is the financial psychology, the questions, the understanding their values and
Mhm.
beliefs and goals. And on the other side, you have this technology and making the information easily accessible and easily digestible. And I'm
Yeah,
sure the technology also helps with the communication aspect
of
of
course.
things.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. Definitely.
so those two things in tandem kind of make you a complete financial advisor for the modern client.
Yeah. Yeah. And you for the modern advisor that you are.
Fantastic. Amazing. Anything else that you wanted to talk about before we wrap up our conversation, or anything I didn't ask you that you want to touch on?
The only thing I would suggest is this this often feels like this is really great, Emily, but I didn't sign up to be a financial therapist. And I understand that there are really great benefits here, but it feels really strange to me. So if you're starting out doing this, again, explore it yourself, but also start to bring it into the conversations with your clients. You can use me if you want to. You can be like, look, I was listening to this conversation with Nate and Emily and they suggested this thing. It's gonna feel a little funny, but I have some questions for you. And you can do it that way. You can call it out, or you can start to just ask some curious questions in the conversations going forward. If you are meeting with new clients, make this a part of the service expectations. Look, we gather information about you personally as well as you financially. This helps us to have the most informed financial plan going forward. And that's just an expectation. So now they um, believe that they're going to receive this from you. And it doesn't feel that strange anymore. So
Mm,
finding ways that feel comfortable for you to approach it and trying it out and the services that you offer, the conversations that you have with your clients is going to be what works best for you. But take one of the actions, start there, lean into the technology as a way to help navigate some of these tough conversations. But ultimately, know that it's going to result in the best experience for you and for them.
amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, for the research that you're doing that's so informative, and for being willing to come in and share it with us today.
No, thank you all. And if you ever need anything from me, I'm happy to connect. And of course, feel free to follow eMoney for all the great work that we're doing. And thank you to Nate and to your team for the invite today.